Hi, everyone. Very cool seeing people from all over the world. Some people with Sak Yant. Hey, Christina, Catalina. Awesome. I got your Instagram message as well. Good to see you here. So yeah, I've been involved with Sak Yant for a very long time. It is a massive, massive subject, and I've struggled condensing it down to an hour. So hopefully you guys are able to stay with it for the entire presentation. This is my first Zoom massive group style presentation like this, so please bear with if there's any technical difficulties. But yeah, let's get started. First with sharing screen. Let's see. Alrighty.
Also, I just wanted to say one thing. So if people have questions as Ian's going through this, you can definitely just type them into the chat, and then that'll be part of the Q&A at the end. So feel free to type any questions you have as we go. Cool? I'm gonna unmute myself. I mean, mute myself.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to be talking about sacred Sak Yant tattoos, which are a type of tattoo said to have a protective or magical incantation put into them. And they become quite the rage over in Thailand over the last few years. But a lot of people just see them as vanity or souvenir tattoos. And we're going to get beneath the skin on that and try and learn everything from the history to what the symbols mean to the process in getting them. So a bit about myself. I started traveling back in 1997. My first trip hitchhiking across Canada that led to a round the world trip in 2000 to 2001. I had an insatiable thirst for travel, and so I studied tourism and travel, which led to me working for a massive travel company, G Adventures. And eventually, after about 6 years and meeting people such as Nomadic Matt, I decided to start my own travel blog and move to Thailand. About a year in, I ended up getting my first Sak Yant tattoo. And a year after that, there was so much interest, I turned my travel blog into a tour company that could help people with the same experience. So here's actually a picture of my brother who inspired me to get my first Sak Yant, and that's him getting his at a temple called Wat Bang Pra. But before we get too much into that history, I want to talk about the history of Sak Yant. It's a practice which has been around thousands of years. Tattooing first found its way into human culture 10,000 years ago. So this is something that has been practiced in many cultures all over the world, but for very different meanings. And we're just going to focus on Sak Yant, of course, today. But to understand how it came to be, we have to understand basically what they believed in that led to them practicing. Oh, there we go. So Thailand, before Buddhism found its way over, was full of animistic beliefs. Animistic beliefs, for those unfamiliar with the word, doesn't mean you believe in animals or that that's your religion. It's more of a spiritual-based belief system, being connected to nature and to our ancestors and to good and evil spirits that exist. Some of the practices that they had were giving nicknames to avoid evil spirits finding you because they could only find you with your real name. There was offerings to fertility gods trying to ensure that you would be successful in having babies. Offering to evil spirits to ward them off from your family and to give safe passage through life. There was festivals, there's spirit homes, more offerings and traditions all around these spirits. A lot of honoring nature, trees, for example, and animals were very important. And as with most ancient cultures, there was shamans, wise people that they would go to when they had problems dealing with what was going on in their lives. In this case, these shamans would be giving them protective amulets, potions, and in some cases, tattoos. So here's some pictures, not thousands of years ago, obviously, but from about 100 years ago or maybe a few decades. But there's a spirit house up on the top left corner, which is somewhere where they would give offerings to their ancestors who are off roaming the streets. In ancient Thai culture, they believe that spirits of your ancestors almost live in purgatory indefinitely. So they always want to make sure that they had food and beverages that they enjoyed. There was Muay Thai practice, which I'm sure many people have heard of. And a lot of that was actually a martial art focused on the animals that lived in that region. So you'll see moves even today, which are around monkeys and tigers, things like that. And of course the Sak Yant, which we're going to be talking about. So visiting a shaman was a very important practice because very often if somebody became sick, they would think that because of all these spirits that they're worshiping and that they're trying to ward off, an evil spirit had possessed someone. And so they would get one of these tattoos generally because of an ailment. And eventually that started changing. But that wasn't until much later when Buddhism found its way into Thailand. So Buddhism isn't really known as one of those colonialist type religions as you would think of with Islam or with Christianity, which moved its way across cultures, invading and converting. But they did do something very similar. They still were bringing the message of Buddha and converting people at the same time. And this drastically changed the entire Southeast region in terms of their belief systems. It also changed a lot of the structures. They started building kingdoms and empires. And these were scattered all across Southeast Asia. You could see Angkor Wat, which is now in Cambodia. There's Ayutthaya, Sukhothai, Bagan over in Myanmar, Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, all of these massive kingdoms, which were centralized learning areas for teaching and educating locals about Buddhism and trying to integrate that religion into them. But through that practice, it was very difficult. It was easy when you were in a city, but it was very difficult in rural areas to get people to buy into this belief system when you were so deeply invested in being connected to nature and to the spirits. And so what ended up happening, as with most major religions, is they started absorbing some of those belief systems into their own local practices, which made it easier to convert people into Buddhism. Oh, well, you do that, that's part of Buddhism. And so if you go to Southeast Asia, you'll probably notice right away that the Buddhism there is quite different than what you might imagine in somewhere like Tibet or Bhutan. Here's some pictures a little more recent where you can see the Sak Yant on the edge here. There are some animals which still exist, showing the bridge of some of those old animistic beliefs. But then there's also going to be some Buddhist images as well. The tree up on the top right there is being wrapped. It's something where they're still connected to nature, but the spirit house has converted into something that almost looks like a little Buddhist temple that you'd find in Thailand. So they're still doing these ancient practices, but now it's labeled as something Buddhist in the region. Now, you'll very often hear Sak Yant tattoos referred to as bamboo tattoos. And that also comes from its origins, which are a hand poke style tattoo. Now, if you go back thousands of years, metalwork wasn't so refined where they could make these precise metal tattoo needles that you would find nowadays in tattoo shops. And so they were just sharpening bamboo rods, and they would use those to puncture the skin. Of course, as time went on, bamboo has the problem of not being very long lasting. And so you might get through one tattoo before it starts splintering. Metal, of course, became a lot more prominent. So even though they are known as bamboo tattoos, very often you'll find now that the Ajarns are using metal rods in the shape of a bamboo stick, but with a permanent metal needle, or sometimes replaceable metal needles as well. Here's a picture just to get an idea of how long those needles are. of one of the Ajarns using it to give a tattoo to somebody. But we're going to talk about that a little later. The ink that they used as well, of course, they didn't have the same access to synthetic tattoo ink that you would find in tattoo shops nowadays. And so all the ink that they were using was something that they made themselves. A lot of this came down to things such as natural oils, coconut oil, herbs that they found nearby, which very often worked as local anesthetics. So it would clean the tattoo as it was being given. And that's actually quite interesting because a lot of the time you'll hear that there's snake venom added to these natural inks. However, I've never met an Ajarn that actually put snake venom in his ink. I suspect that it stings like a snake bite because of the antiseptics that they use. And then there was colors. Now there's not many colors associated with Sak Yant, but those would come from things such as charcoal to give the black color, or red, which was something usually reserved for royalty, where they would find these rare flowers in the forest and use those to give the ink its color. Now, very often you'll only find one color per Sak Yant, per design. And that's because the black ink is more of a general protection for pretty much any Sak Yant you could get in black. The red, they say, gives a charm of love or a love enchantment to the Sak Yant. And so for it to be pure love, you would only use the red ink to give that individual Sak Yant, which is probably a charm to be attracting people into your lives. However, nowadays, people are a lot more aesthetically minded or into the vanity. And so you've started seeing some Ajarns, not many, mixing the black and the red inks into the Sak Yant, as you see in the top left. Now, there's a weird one where there's actually no color added, and these are just with the oil and the herbs. So because of the nature of Sak Yant, these are being given to give a protection or an enchantment in your life. You wouldn't be getting this necessarily for the vanity reasons, for the symbology or the design element. You're getting it for the meaning that's behind the tattoo itself. And we will talk about that a little later as well. And so getting an oil Sak Yant is actually quite common in Thailand, even though this is a very fresh example. A month later, you might not see it at all, unless if you got suntanned, the scar tissue might be a slightly different color. So for those of you that are interested in doing this, but don't want your mom to find out, this is the right Sak Yant for you. Now, it is very traditional that you would be using the kem sak, the long metal rods, to be giving these tattoos. However, I have met some Ajarns who have modernized in a way and are using the modern tattoo machines that you find in regular tattoo shops around the world. I would say that there's no problem with that. The Ajarns that are giving them are trained, they're experienced. This is just a different medium for them to give, although many people I've met who are interested in doing this don't want the machine element, they want the more traditional tattoo rod. The reasons I've seen people moving to machines generally are because there was one gentleman, an Ajarn up in Chiang Rai, who had a motorcycle accident and dislocated his shoulder. So he's got a metal plate and can't actually use the rod anymore. And there's another Ajarn in the temple that my brother and I got, actually the Ajarn that we got our Sak Yant from. He's developed carpal tunnel syndrome from just years and years and years of that repetitive hand movement. So he uses a tattoo machine now as well. As well, a lot of tattoo ink, modern day ink, is being used by Ajarns, probably just because of the ease of getting it, the sterile aspect of the ink itself, and because it is a bit of work to create an ink, especially if you've got a high volume of people coming through. There's a lot of work to go into making that custom ink yourself. So it is evolving and it is modernizing, but the elements of everything behind Sak Yant are still pure in their essence. Now, it's not limited to Sak Yant what a lot of these Ajahns do. You're seeing some pretty strange pictures here. The top left is actually my cousin. She came to visit last year in Thailand and didn't want to go through committing all the way with a tattoo. She was with her mom, who's underneath there. She just wanted to get a blessing from the Ajahn. And giving blessings is another way of getting a type of protection from them without having to go under the needle. And so in her case, she was getting a piece of gold leaf placed on her tongue, on her forehead, and on her back. And this was supposed to help overall with health and to be more articulate with her speaking. My aunt on the bottom left there is just getting a yantra drawn on her forehead, although it's not even with a pen or a marker or anything like that. It's just a slightly sharpened piece of wood that's being scratched very lightly into her forehead, drawing out the pattern of the yantra. Then we've got my friend Mike over here, travel blogger, Fearless and Far, and he's a little extreme. He wanted to push the limits of what Sak Yant do. He actually got his first Sak Yant about a year before I got mine. So he's been in this game for a very long time as well. And so when he visited the Ajahn, he wanted something a little unusual. And the Ajahn decided to give him an invisible Sak Yant all over his face. And each part, from his forehead to his eyelids, to his cheeks, to even his lip and his tongue, all had a different meaning behind why he was getting those markings or those yantras tapped into his skin. I've even heard, but I didn't put a slide in, of people getting special yantras which are in a metal tube implanted under their skin. And that's for the super daring, extreme, whatever, not my thing. Now, these protective symbols don't exist only in tattoos. As you can see here on the top left, this is actually drawn on the roof of a taxi driver in Bangkok. And it's very much the same type of pattern that you're going to see everywhere else. But he would be getting this probably from an Ajahn or a monk drawing on the roof of his taxi so that he has protection, that he's not getting in accidents. It's probably a good thing if you see a taxi driver with one of these on his roof, or for good luck with his business. So he's earning a lot of money. So maybe it's a bad thing if you see a taxi driver with one of those on his roof, trying to get a little extra money from you. You've got a yantra drawn on a cloth known as a pai yant on the bottom left. And these are wall hangings that you can buy in magical markets, places where they sell things of this nature. And you would hang this in your house or in your business to ward off evil spirits or to bring luck and enchantment to your business. And then the gentleman on the right here is wearing a ton of amulets. He's also got a few Sak Yant as well. But these amulets are interesting because they do the exact same thing. They give you these different types of protections or enchantments in your life. But the funny thing with these is that they're temporary. You only put them on when you're leaving your home, and then you take them off when you get home. So for those, again, who don't really want to commit to the full Sak Yant tattooing process, there's other options available out there for you to be able to get these types of protections. Now, there's a lot of different symbols that you've already seen, and similarly to how we talked about animism sort of melding into Buddhism, we're going to talk a little bit about how the symbols have changed over the years as well. So as we were talking about earlier, a lot of the animism was being connected to nature. And so a lot of the designs that you would have seen back then were of different animals that you found in the region. There's geckos on the bottom left, an elephant, an alligator. You would have seen frogs. There was also celestial patterns, their own constellations that they would have seen at night. So a lot of the protections, even though they had meanings like perhaps the strength of a crocodile or of a tiger, or the luck of an elephant, these types of meanings behind them, it was all very nature-based, being connected to where they were. There was also a character who we're going to talk a lot more about later, who is known as the Rusi, and he is sort of like the Buddha of Sak Yant. He was a wise hermit who went off into the forest and spent years studying nature and connecting with it and learning how this magic of our world was all connected, and figuring out basically how to put that into these protective symbols. So he became a teacher and a master himself. You will see every now and then Sak Yant who represent him as well. Every single temple that you go to, or samnak, which is the local term for the studio in which, or the sacred studios in which Ajahns practice, instead of seeing statues of Buddha, you're going to see hundreds of statues of different versions of this Rusi, of this hermit that they're worshiping. Here's another picture from another samnak, and you can see slightly blurred in the background, but there's just hundreds and hundreds of statues of Rusi. Now, when India started coming over, and Sri Lanka, a lot of it was from the south of India, bringing over Buddhism to that region of Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar. They brought with them other practices as well, some which aren't as well known in India, but a yantra, the name Sak Yant comes from yantras, which are a protective symbol that you would find down in southern India. And these protective symbols, I suppose, had enough similarities to the types of designs that the meaning behind the designs that these shamans were giving in Thailand or in that region, that they started getting incorporated into the tattoos themselves. A lot of their symbols actually were elemental as well. And so yantras in their origin, from southern India, for example, a circle would represent the element of water. Triangles represented fire, and squares represented the earth. So these symbols that you'll find in many of the patterns that you see online, and there's over 10,000 different types of Sak Yant, very often you're going to see these basic rudimentary symbols, squares, circles, and triangles being used in them, or those geometric patterns as well. And that's some overlap from the practices that were brought over with Buddhism and Hinduism to the local region. Here's some examples where you'll see different symbols, and obviously this is veered very far away from the animals that they originally were. And not only were there yantras, of course, Buddhism and Hinduism was playing a very big role in the changing of this culture. And so a lot of the deities, or I mean, Hinduism has dozens of gods and deities and figures that you see through they're probably one of the most colorful and rich belief systems on earth. And you'll see a lot of their symbols getting used. So Ganesh on the bottom left, there's Hanuman riding on top of a lion on the right there. And so a lot of these symbols started finding their way into Sak Yant as well. But probably the most well-known symbol, even if you're not into Sak Yant, you may have seen this symbol before. And this is called a unilome. And the unilome may be the most important symbol in Sak Yant. You can see on the on the right here, the two different variations, the male and female unilomes. And what they represent is the path to enlightenment, or even just your journey through life. The bottom representing the swirl of your youth, where there's no real given direction, you're just sort of going with the flow of life, learning different things, and then eventually branching off into a higher adolescence where you start trying things on your own, be it that path to enlightenment, or even just figuring out what you want to do with your life. And you make a mistake and it kind of U-turns and then veers back, and you try something else, veers again after another mistake. But every time it veers back and forth, you see it getting a little more refined. you're not making the same big mistakes. It's getting more and more in focus to who you are and who you want to be, until finally the top part there where you've got more of a direct path, and that direct path to enlightenment as well. If you look on the left, you'll see the unilomes being used everywhere. Every single Sak Yant has the unilome involved in it, helping you find that path to enlightenment, or that path to what it is that you want or need from this Sak Yant. There's also a lot of funny characters that you're going to see, and these go back to the old kingdoms. So they weren't really using script as you might have saw around the animals that I showed before. These came in as written language was being introduced into the region, and there was different kingdoms being formed. And so the region where central Bangkok is stretched all the way over into Cambodia, all the way to Vietnam even. That was Angkor, the Angkorian kingdom. And so even though Thailand, new political borders have changed, and Thailand is now separate and Vietnam is now separate, that entire region, if they're practicing Sak Yant, still use that script, which is the script that is used in Cambodia today. You often hear a bit of confusion. These are Cambodian tattoos. Look, they're using Cambodian script. But these geopolitical boundaries are very new in the grand scheme of things. The traditions of these extends far back beyond that. Now, if you were to go into northern Thailand, they're using Lana script. They're not using Thai script either. They're using the script that was used by the kingdoms that existed up there. And the same holds true over in Myanmar for the Bagan kingdom. So you'll see a lot of Burmese scripts being used in their Sak Yant. These scripts are what give the Sak Yant their power. They're not actually words that are being written into the tattoos. They are mantras or magical incantations. Sometimes you hear these if you are visiting the region and you go to a Buddhist temple, and at night you'll see all the monks converge and start chanting. And sometimes they're not even saying words, but they're saying sounds which represent ideas. So a character could make a sound like Gor, Por, Tor, More, and each one of those is actually representing a bigger idea. And so if somebody was to say, well, can you read this? Does it say, does it say what it's supposed to say? A Cambodian, a Thai, anyone fluent in these languages wouldn't be able to read it. It's just a jumble of these sounds and these mantras being put together. Only somebody who's gone through extensive training would be able to decipher what it is that this incantation is supposed to be. Very often with this picture, as you see, there's a lot of script and only a few pictures. Usually once the canvas, your skin, starts running out of space, then when they start going back, instead of more symbols, it just gets filled with the incantations or the mantras instead. And here's a picture of my brother and I with our brand new Sak Yant, and my uncle with his invisible Sak Yant. He didn't actually join us, but but he wanted to. He wanted to fit in. But the reason that we got our Sak Yant, it's a long story, so I'm not going to get too deeply into it in this session. But basically, we were experiencing a family trauma over in Thailand. And my brother did some research and found these Sak Yant, which were these magical enchanted tattoos that I'd never heard of, which one of them he found was supposed to give us good luck while we're traveling. And what better symbol for our family undergoing this trauma, for me who dedicated my life to travel, and for my brother who it was his first trip overseas, than to get something which symbolized protection while we were traveling, and perhaps the strength to move forward after that. But it wasn't until a few years later where actually one of my brother's friends came to visit, and he was interested in the practice and asked if I'd be able to help facilitate him going. Now, I had already been helping facilitate with our tours for a couple of years and had some good connections now with different Ajarns around the country. And we were up in Chiang Mai, and I said, yeah, I think that would be great. If you want, I can just send you with the guide. He's like, no, I think it's important that you come. And it was amazing. He he really opened up, and I saw the potential of what the Sak Yant could be. I mean, I knew what the potential was for myself and through some of the clients that we had helped, but the way that he interacted with the Ajarn, I had never seen before, and I probably have yet to see again to this depth. Where, I mean, we were the only ones there, and the Ajarn wasn't busy, so we had hours to kill. But he just rambled about a lot of difficult things that are going on in his life, traumas from his childhood, difficulty connecting to his parents. He's a manager of high-end restaurants and having trouble finding a level playing field with his staff. He didn't like feeling like he was on a pedestal, but wanting to feel as an equal, and also struggles with addiction. Now, generally when people go to see an Ajarn, they're just going for one reason. But the way the Ajarn listened very mindfully to his story and then was able to connect this Ajarn blew my mind. He suggested, and this is usually the way it goes, that the best suited Sak Yant for him was Hanuman riding on top of a lion, coming back victorious from battle. Now, if you were to read in a book or somebody's blog, it would probably just say that this Sak Yant represents power over overcoming challenges, something very basic. But the Ajarn talked about the story of Hanuman, who was a monkey, not a god, although sometimes revered as a deity. He was requested by one of Hindus' gods, Vishnu, to lead his army, a very prestigious role. Now, for a god to see a level of respect, to be able to find that level of respect with a monkey, to have such a position of valor, of greatness, meant that he did respect Hanuman quite a bit to bestow that upon him. He said that that part of the Sak Yant would help pardon me, my friend, with the trouble he was having with his parents. But Hanuman had to convince thousands of monkeys to lead him into battle to fight for gods that they didn't believe in. And so to do that took a different level of respect, where the monkeys weren't following him into battle because he was assigned by some god. They were doing it because they saw him as an equal, and that would help him with his connection with his staff. Now, riding on top of a lion is not something you normally see monkeys do in nature, but Hanuman was smart, and he was able to outwit the lion, something which would otherwise be able to kill him or dominate him. And he said that that part of the Sak Yant would be able to help him with his trouble with addictions. If you think of an addiction being able to overcome you, you have to be able to outsmart it. This was so profound, it just blew my mind, and it really opened up a lot of my viewpoints on how Sak Yant are interpreted in the mind of the Ajarn who's giving them. Sometimes they don't go into such great detail when they're assigning them, but the knowledge and the wisdom that's behind them is going into that. So who are these guys? The tattoo masters. Sometimes you'll hear that they're only given by monks. Sometimes you'll hear the word Ajarn. We've referred to them as shamans. And this guy here sitting with a Rusi mask, sort of in the position of the hermit, a little gangster, but obviously not a monk. So because these predate Buddhism, it was never expected for the shamans to be anything more than what they were. They were wise men that you go to seek advice from. But very often you will see monks now who are practicing Ajarns. Now, there's a bit of complexity in this because you don't have to be a monk to give an Ajarn, but you do have to be a monk before you can give an Ajarn. And that sounds a little weird until you realize that every man in Thailand or in this region is expected to become a monk at some point in his life. It could be for 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years, however long they choose. It is a way of giving merit to Buddhism, but also to your family. You're going and learning the practices of Buddhism and bringing that back to your family and to your community. So it's actually a very beautiful way of sharing that ideology. Now, Sak Yant do exist in some temples, like the one that my brother and I went to. However, there are a lot of Ajarns who don't do the whole lifetime thing. And again, this practice was predating it. There's some Ajarns who may start studying Sak Yant from a non-monk before they enter the Sangha. They'll just have to do their time, maybe a couple weeks in the temple before they can come back and become an Ajarn themselves after they've studied. I should add before getting into the process that the studying is not a short-term thing either. It's almost like a PhD. Some of these Ajarns, they'll study with multiple masters for 4, 5, 6 years, sometimes even longer. And they have to learn the way that that Ajarn that my friend went to visit, being able to figure out that of the 10,000 symbols, what is best suited for the person who is coming to visit them. As well, learning how all those magical incantations work, and learning the Wicha, getting the power of the Sak Yant, and learning how to control that. So there's a lot of rituals which you'll see in Sak Yant, practiced even today. And a lot of this is about giving. It's sort of like a karmic energy that's being given back and forth. And so before you can get your Sak Yant, you should pay respect to the Rusi, the hermit masks that you've been seeing. And that's often with a prayer, perhaps some bowing and some lighting of some incense. There's also flower offerings and other things which are involved in that. Then you'll go in and you'll show respect to your Ajarn, and you'll make an offering to him. These offerings are often, again, flowers, incense, candles. Sometimes, funny enough, there's packs of cigarettes that are given. I'm not sure how that tradition found its way in. But this actually leads to a very quick debate as well. There's a cost associated with Sak Yant, not just the act of giving, but the symbolism of giving, making these offerings, but usually monetarily as well. Now, Thai people or Cambodian people or Burmese people, they are giving to monks almost every day of their life. Every time they go to a temple, they're making an offering financially, which goes to support the livelihoods of these monks, the upkeep of the temples, and also pays for the services that these monks provide. So if you are to visit one of these temples, there may be a customary symbolic donation, and you'll see it as low as $2 American to get a tattoo. However, you have to remember that Thai people have sort of paid into this their whole life. Even if they're giving only $1 a day to a monk, or a food donation, or money to the temples, over the course of a year, that's $365. Over the case of a decade, that's $3,650 that they've paid towards these tattoos. So of course, that 50 baht donation, that 100 baht donation, these $2, $3 donations, it's symbolic for them. But as a foreign visitor, is it right for us to reap on the privileges that the Thais have paid into their entire lives for such a low cost? And so I'll leave that for the audience to decide if it's worth giving more for the practice. The Ajarns that practice outside of the temples, generally, they would work in the past for different types of donations, bartering. Maybe you can dig me a well, or fix my roof, or give me a chicken. But times have changed, and there's bills to pay, there's kids to feed, there's school bills, there's a lot of different things that come for not for free, and that you can't really get by exchanging a chicken. Or I would love to see an Ajarn try to pay his electrical bill or his internet bill with Sak Yant for the staff. But so it's become more customary that the tattoos that the Ajarns outside of the temple, who are not reaping on these rewards or benefits of all these lifetime donations, you would pay roughly the same amount that you would pay a tattoo shop. And I think that's fair. Generally, you would want to, as we've talked a little bit about, share some of the needs or expectations or goals that you have to the Ajarn. And this is something that often gets lost if you go to visit an Ajarn without a translator and the Ajarn can't speak English. And basically, you're going to want to talk about things that are important in your life or things that you're trying to overcome, traumas from your past, fears that you have, perhaps a goal. Maybe you're starting a new business and you want luck with your business. These are the types of things that Thai people are going to visit the Ajarns for. And you can see it's a little more complex than 1,000 years ago when it was just, I don't want to get sick from the current plague. Well, I guess that hasn't really changed. Whoops. Or I don't want to have evil spirits into my house. Our lives have gotten a lot more complicated, and the requests that you're making to the Ajarns have also gotten a lot more complicated. But usually you're not going to go with a lifelong story. You're just going to try and focus on one of those aspects of your life and have a Sak Yant that symbolizes that. So going with a translator is the service that we provide. And we're just trying to bridge that gap where you're able to actually share that part of your story and understand what it is that the Ajarns, the reason that he's giving these protective symbols for you. It is not like a tattoo shop. Although a lot of people have started going in and requesting Ajarns for specific symbols that they've read about online or that they've seen in pictures or on books or whatever, it's not the real reason why you should be going. And I think if you go that route, you're going to be missing out on a lot deeper connection with what it is that you're getting on your body. That being said, the reasons that my friend got his Sak Yant, somebody else could get Hanuman riding on top of a lion for completely different reasons. It would be really hard for somebody else to come in saying, trouble with my parents, trouble with my staff, addictions. So there's lots of different reasons why you could get that. And the Ajarn's going to use his wisdom to assign it, but he's probably going to change that script to be more customized to you as well. And so by going in and requesting specific designs, again, without that consultation, you're missing out on having it being really customized and unique to you and to your story and to your journey. So we're going to see a quick video, just a couple minutes, which shows a bit of the process. So if you're squeamish, maybe cover your eyes until the music stops.
Ready?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't hurt, right? No pain?
Don't cry.
Right, so that video was actually made by Fearless and Far. Mike Corey, amazing travel blogger. I put the link right there if you want to see the full video. He talks about going to amulet markets, and a bit about the process afterwards as well, his feelings, the reasons why he was getting the Sak Yant, all of that. There are usually some more blessings which happen after. Now, because each Ajarn is their own practitioner and there is no textbook or Bible or anything like that which gives the full, from beginning to end, of how an Ajarn should practice, these do vary from Ajarn to Ajarn. You're going to see different Samnak setups, different interview processes. Sometimes they focus more on fortune telling or giving Buddhist precepts. Also, the practices in terms of the offering ceremonies or the blessing afterwards could change. So this is me getting a blessing from Ajar Neng, one of the Ajarns that we work with in Bangkok. And right now he is saying a mantra, which, well, you're not going to find many videos, or you shouldn't find many videos, because it's a secret code that the Ajarn says to push the magic that he's bestowing in the Sak Yant into the tattoo, and then he blows on it to seal the magic into your skin. It's like every time I've gone, I get goosebumps all over my body. It's so intense and magical. It's incredible. Very often they use, there's a silver bowl in the back there full of water. It's sort of like a holy water. And again, he's going to be saying a magical incantation and with a wooden whisk, dosing you with a bit of water. And every now and then you see Ajarns using gold leaf. And this isn't a very common practice, but for the Ajarns that are, again, all of these practices that you see, the giving before you receive, like you make the offerings at the beginning for the Sak Yant, the Ajarn who is giving something symbolic of value for you to be able to receive something symbolic of value from the tattoo. So it's a very beautiful process, and very often those steps, I mean, you can get lost in the moment and, okay, now I've got to do this and now I've got to do that. But in retrospect, it's just very beautiful the way that everything is done. And I'm sure even some of the meaning has been lost through time. But yeah, I digress. So there is rules, scratch that, guidelines. Now you will hear often people say, you've got to follow rules for Sak Yant. And the reason I don't like using the word rules is that it has a negative connotation. That if you break rules, there will be punishments or consequences. And generally, a lot of these guidelines that come with the Sak Yant, they could be from the Samnak, from the Ajarn, or specific to the pattern or protection that you've gotten yourself. These are basically just, they fall into one of two categories. Don't do harm to others and don't do harm to yourself. Now, if you expect a tattoo to give you some kind of enchantment in your life, you can't go around being a jerk to other people or hurting yourself and expecting good things to happen. I mean, that just comes down to karma. Some of the rules or guidelines could sound a little harsh. Don't drink alcohol. Well, I've talked to the Ajarn up in Chiang Mai, the one in the video that you just saw. He said, well, yeah, you shouldn't drink alcohol, but it's not so much about the alcohol. It's about the reasons why people are drinking and the mindfulness behind it. If you're going out and getting wasted so that you can just forget about what's going on in your life, you're hurting your mind, you're hurting your body. If you want to get wasted because you just broke up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, you're doing it to forget things, and you're losing a path of focus to try and be a better version of yourself. And then there's some weird antiquated ones. Don't walk under ladders or don't eat pumpkin. That one I always thought was kind of funny. And the Ajarns were like, oh, well, it might be antiquated. I mean, I remember visiting my first travel health advisor, and they said, don't eat don't eat salads. You know, if they grow on the ground and they're not properly washed, you can get hepatitis, you can get sick. Well, the same for gourds. The monk I was asking about this pumpkins, he said, yeah, you know, there's pumpkin patches around the temple I grew up studying in. And when we'd sleep in the temple in the middle of the night, I'd run out and I'd pee in the pumpkin patch. Well, you probably don't want to eat those pumpkins unless if they're thoroughly washed. So you have to take these guidelines with a grain of salt, just keeping in mind that all of them are just there to keep you on a path of trying to be a better version of yourself, to everybody that you're impacting in your life and to yourself. You got to look after yourself as well. And I think that's something that can resonate very well right now as well. So I get, like, it's hard being perfect all year round, and we make slips and we do things which sometimes, you know, go off the deep end, and maybe you did have a rough patch with your significant other and got a little drunk, or you ate some unwashed pumpkin. So at the end of every year, well, on certain celestial days, usually different ajarns or different temples have a ceremony which is called Y Crew. And I mean, the etymology of that, Y is the symbol that you see of people putting their hands together and bowing. It's paying respect. And Crew is an ajarn, but like a grand master. So it's paying respect to the masters. And this is a festival where you can go, well, I've heard people say, get your tattoo recharged. And it's not really about doing that so much as it is a reminder to yourself to realign with those values. The tattoo itself is always on your body. It's always got that magical incantation. It's always had the magic pushed into it. But you want to realign yourself about being mindful and what it is that you want to accomplish from these tattoos. But going back all the way to these animistic days and the spirit belief that's still so deeply woven in the Buddhism found in this region, people feel this connection to the spirits. They're still changing their names to avoid evil spirits. They're still using spirit houses, and they're still worshiping the spirits as well. And so through years of going to these ceremonies and through years of this practice, very often you'll see people who have been practicing falling into a trance, much like the tingling sensation I felt over my body after getting the tattoo sealed. Imagine that on steroids with the background and the knowledge of these superstitions. People can go into a trance and become possessed by the spirits in the tattoos. Now, as Erica mentioned at the beginning, we were really fortunate we got to go out to this festival together. It was crazy, it was wild. I've been about 5 or 6 times now. And I've got another little video to show you just to see what happens when this group of people get together and the energy levels are so high.
Each year, over 10,000 people gather at Wat Bang Pa, a large Buddhist temple about an hour outside Bangkok in Nakhon Pathom province, for the Y Crew festival. Y Crew means to pay respect to the master, to the living Sak Yant masters of Wat Bang Pa, and to the greatest Sak Yant master, Luang Por Pern.
คนทั่วไปนับถือหลวงพ่อเปิ้ลได้มาสักยันต์กับอาจารย์
The evening before the Y Crew, ajarns and Buddhist monks apply new Sak Yant to devotees, and they receive offerings of flowers and cigarettes as they work continuously throughout the night. The following morning, the ceremony begins. The monks recite the kata, the incantations, to recharge and renew the blessing of the tattoos. And for many devotees, this is the time they experience Kamku, the altered state of consciousness they enter when their Sak Yant gets reactivated. Once the incantations have been recited, the ceremony ends, and those in the crowd jostle to get to the front as the monks spray everyone with holy water.
เป็นพลเมืองดีมารออยู่นะครับที่ด้านซ้ายคุณใหญ่ใช่ไหม
Again, I want to give credit to the producer of that film. You can find him on Vimeo, Gennaro Ambrosino, and he's done some amazing documentaries. I think this one really brings home the feeling that probably Erica felt, maybe some flashbacks to just the madness that you might experience there. However, it's not always like that. That is the biggest ceremony in Thailand. It is Wat Bang Pra, the temple that my brother and I got our first Sak Yant at. And it has so many devotees, 10,000 people coming every year, that you end up seeing that much energy in one space. Here's Ajahn Neng's Samnak, his white crew. A little smaller, a little more intimate. And I mean, I've seen bigger ones, maybe about 100, 150 people, but these are his personal followers, people who have gone to see him for a Sak Yant. Now, if you have a Sak Yant, the person who gives it to you is your master, or Ajahn, which directly translates to teacher. So you are his students. You'd be coming back to pay respect to them, and going to Y crews around the world generally is a little more chilled out, like it is here, where you get some more one-on-one time with the Ajahns. Here he is doing a blessing with one of the hermit masks. Every now and then you will see somebody start going into that altered state. I've even seen it while people were getting the tattoos in the first place. But if you haven't been studying and practicing and trying to do that, you're probably not, you don't have to worry about turning into Hanuman or a frog or a snake slithering across the ground. This is, again, something that you have to be fully invested in Sak Yant, and sort of like meditation. You don't get it right on the first try. Falling into a trance is accessing that different part of your brain, and it takes a lot of practice to get there. So just to finish off here, I'm going to try and break down some of the myths that you might read about online. Often they're just misinterpretations, misinformation that's been spread around. One person wrote about it, and then everybody starts perpetuating that information. One is that women can't get Sak Yant. And you will read this online, although as you've seen in the pictures, in this picture as well, women can get Sak Yant. The stigma or the idea of this just came because monks who are currently in the Sangha, who are studying and practicing to be a monk, to go back to their community, are not supposed to touch women. However, an Ajahn who has left the Sangha, by all means, can do that. There are some more progressive current monks who understand that Sak Yant has absolutely no sexual connotations, and so his mind will stay pure while he's giving a Sak Yant. Very often, though, in that case, you just shouldn't take a picture, because pictures could, taken in the wrong angle, could be compromising for the monk's reputation. Only monks can give blessings. Of course, we've seen as well the Ajahns can be monk or non-monk. the most important part is that they've studied under a Grand Master for a number of years and become ordained with this power to bestow Sak Yant to other people. This is a funny one. I think I might have helped perpetuating this at the very beginning, talking about Ajarns reading your aura, and a lot of that was just my lack of knowledge. As we talked about earlier on, usually you would be going to visit an Ajarn or a shaman in any other ancient culture for a reason, for a purpose. Not being able to communicate with an Ajarn and them giving you a tattoo as a result may seem like they read your energy, your aura, whatever, but really it's just them kind of saving face and giving you something safe, like a general protection against harm or a general protection against getting sick. I'm pretty sure that can apply to everyone. And not to take away from an experience if you've gone off and done that and felt that, although monks do study magical incantations, they don't get superpowers through those studies. One design always means the same thing. Hatiao, the image shown here, made probably most popular by Angelina Jolie. You will read each line has a specific meaning, but as we've talked about, Sak Yant can be modified to your personal meaning. There may be a general meaning, a general protection associated, but there can be tweaks to that general protection as well, which only comes through that consultation that you have with the Ajarn. Sak Yant are Thai or Buddhist in origin. As we talked about, Thailand as a country, as a geopolitical state, is quite new in the past century. And so it can't really be Thai if these are thousands of years old. And I know a lot of Cambodians often get a little upset. They say, it's Cambodian, it's got Khmer language. But as we talked about as well, different kingdoms, different scripts. These are regional, but also predate Buddhism, even though there is Buddhism incorporated in them now. And as I just mentioned, you're not going to get possessed if you've got a Sak Yant, unless if you really, really want to, and you practice regularly falling into that trance state. But you might feel something. You probably will. I mean, everybody has a very different experience. It is a very personal experience, spiritual for some, just important for others. It depends how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. And today, hopefully, was the first step down that very deep rabbit hole. So, thanks for tuning in. I've got a few contacts if you want to get in touch. We've got our social media channels, all of them, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, at WSC Travel. You can email us with any questions, and our website to check out some of the other stuff that we're doing as well. But I'm gonna take that back to Erica. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Oh my goodness, Ian. I feel like I just went to a history lesson and I am like very excited. If I ever get a tattoo, I will definitely go through you. I don't think that's gonna happen, but ever.
I could see your face while you were watching the video of Mike getting his tattoo, and yeah, I could tell this isn't, maybe we'll go for the gold leaf.
Exactly. I feel, at that one festival, I saw hundreds of people getting a tattoo and ended up in the kitchen cooking with the women. So it might be a stretch, but if I get a tattoo, that's what I'll get. That was just phenomenal. I know we're a little bit over, but I feel like there are some questions, definitely from Catalina. There weren't really many as you were going so thoroughly through your presentation, but I just want to say thank you first. That was really wonderful.
Thank you for the honor to be able to be sharing on the Nomadic Network, and for everybody that tuned in. I mean, new faces, old faces, thank you guys so much.
Yeah. it's a testament to like when you really love something and you really just dig to the core of it, and being able to like share it the way you did so effortlessly was really, really interesting. And I'm glad our network got to experience that. Okay, so I'm going to